Ladies and gentlemen, this is your friendly neighborhood reptile here, back again. Now, I'm going to be talking about one of the greatest things to ever come out into this world. Now, you already know that me, as a gamer, I very much appreciate this kind of stuff. What I'm talking about today is none other than the Sega Dreamcast. Today marks the 20th anniversary of the release of the Dreamcast in America. It came out on September 9th, 1999. I was only 2 months old when this thing was in the market. I was only 2 months old, not joking. And now here I am, 20 years old, along with a 20-year-old console. I mean, I guess it ain't any better than that. Although it is kind of a cruel irony that I'm actually older than the console by 2 months. But I digress. What I want to talk about is why I think the Sega Dreamcast is one of the greatest consoles of all time, and my thoughts on it too. Now, I know I've reviewed this console before, but I'm actually thinking about making a new, like a whole new review. You know what I mean? Like, I want to do like a whole brand new review of the Sega Dreamcast. I'm even thinking about getting components for the Dreamcast where I can record HD gameplay with the games that I have for it. But the Dreamcast, in my opinion, really is one of the greatest game consoles of all time. Even though when it first came out, it was successful during launch. Don't get me wrong, but right around the March of 2000, when the PlayStation 2 first hit the market, the Dreamcast declined significantly, all due to the popularity of the PS2, the PlayStation 2, and the Dreamcast failed in the market a lot. You also had the fact that it was easy to pirate games onto it. So like you could easily like burn a game like off a PC or something like that, and you could play it in the Dreamcast, no restrictions. You also have the fact that the Dreamcast doesn't have backwards compatibility with the console. So like there's no backwards compatibility on the Dreamcast is what I'm trying to say. Sorry, I'm just fumbling my words. But yeah, you can't play Sega Saturn games on it. The closest we got to having backwards compatibility was when the Bleemcast first came out. If you guys do remember what Bleem is, that was the original PlayStation 1 emulator before EPSXE came around. EPSXE nowadays is basically the definitive PS1 emulator because it plays everything perfectly, at least near perfectly. But Bleem, on the other hand, was pretty glitchy. And again, this was during a time when stuff like that was in its infancy. So there was an unofficial port of Bleem, and I say unofficial because it wasn't licensed by Sega, but it came out on the Dreamcast, and yes, they did make money off of it too, which is one of the main reasons why Sony sued them, and that's why Bleem got shut down forever. But I'm pretty sure it's still accessible to this day as an old file, but I think you can only use it on older Windows versions or something like that. I don't know. But yeah, they used that, and you had the ability to play PS1's games on it, but it was emulated. For the most part, it supported Tekken 3 and Metal Gear Solid. Those are like the two main games that it was sold for, because at the time, Tekken 3 and Metal Gear Solid, both of which came out in the same year for the PlayStation 1, 1998, both of them at the time were the most popular games on the PS1 at the time. You also had the fact that Gran Turismo was too, which was another game that was compatible with the Dreamcast. But let's not focus on PS1. We're here to talk about the Dreamcast. So I think the Dreamcast, even though it didn't have the greatest controllers in the world, I thought they were very unique. They were big, yes, but I still thought they were unique in the sense that, you know, they had these little VMUs that you plug into them. You could have like two of them plugged into it. They were the ones that acted as the memory cards. So even though it didn't have like a hard disk drive in it, you were still able to save them onto your own memory cards, which rather than plugging it into the console like you would with the other systems like the PlayStation or the Sega Saturn, you actually had the ability to plug it into your controller. And not just that, but they also had these little LCD screens on it. They're called the Visual Memory Unit. That's what they're called, the VMUs. And they were honestly one of the best parts about the Dreamcast. And what's even greater is that if you have like a working backup battery inside the VMU, you can actually play mini games of the games that are saved onto your VMU, which is one of the coolest features any game console could have. I mean, there's, in my opinion, there's no other game console that gets any more creative than that. You know what I mean? So that's why I think the Dreamcast is awesome in that sense. But what makes it like one of the top gaming consoles of all time was the library of games that it had. When this system first came out, it was responsible for putting out some of the greatest video games of all time. I'm not even kidding. Like a lot of the games that came out on the Dreamcast, just like some of them even spawned in like a whole like series and all that. But you also have the fact that it also has ports of already established franchises that were regarded as better than their other console counterparts. Some of these examples of some of the best Soul Calibur games of all time. I mean, I'm sorry, Sega Dreamcast games of all time. But yes, I did say Soul Calibur though, because the original Soul Calibur, in my opinion, that is my all-time favorite Dreamcast game because I love Soul Calibur, and I'm sure I'm not the only one who agrees with that. Even if Soul Calibur is not your favorite, you can't deny the fact that Soul Calibur is indeed one of the greatest games ever made. Like, it undoubtedly is. The 8-way run system, the story, the gameplay, the graphics, the music, everything about this game, especially at its time when it first came out, it was a groundbreaking achievement for fighting games since it introduced free movement, something that wasn't common with a lot of fighting games at the time. You know what I mean? So that's why Soul Calibur ends up number one on my list. But there are other games that were on the Dreamcast that are some of the best of all time, like Shenmue, Sonic Adventure, Skies of Arcadia, Jet Set Radio, Crazy Taxi, Resident Evil Code Veronica, Marvel vs. Capcom 2, like the best version of Marvel vs. Capcom 2, Sonic Adventure 2, The House of the Dead 2, Street Fighter 3, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2, Unreal Tournament, Quake 3. You know, there was like, oh, and I almost forgot, Ready to Rumble Boxing, Hydro Thunder. Like, there was just so many great games that came out on this console. And I feel as if it's very underappreciated. Like, I feel like this is one of those consoles that needs a lot more love. After all, this was Sega's final console before they ended production and just stopped making consoles completely and just stuck to making, games for, like, other companies and platforms and all that stuff. Because with the failures of both the Sega Saturn and the Dreamcast was basically that moment where Sega realized that it was time for them to hang up the boots in the console industry. They thought they tapped out. They thought enough was enough. Let's just stop making consoles and let's just continue to do our job as publishers. Because after all, during the early days of Sega, they used to port some of their games on the Atari 2600, which is crazy because at the time, around like 86, even 83, that was when the Sega SG-1000, also known as the Sega Master System here in America, first came out. But again, I digress. Dreamcast is just one of those systems that you have to buy in order to experience it. Like, really. There are some emulators on Dreamcast, but I don't think they're the best way to play the Dreamcast, honestly. Besides, you can easily find a Dreamcast console anywhere online, ranging from like $50 to $100, anywhere between $50 to $100. I would say like the cheapest one that you'll find in decent condition will probably be at GameStop for $70. I would say that would probably be like the best one you could get. But at the same time, you can also go on eBay and buy a Sega Dreamcast along with, a collection of games in which they call game lots. That's usually the best way to buy new consoles, like old school consoles online and all that, because like it's bundled with games and all that, so you save a lot of money in the long run. But some people like to be picky with the choices of games they have, so they like to pick the console first and then pick the games separately and all that. But you know what I mean. Not to mention, this game also had, even though the PlayStation 1 had it too, which in my opinion I think is so far like the best version, just my honest opinion. But you also have the fact that it also had another famous Neversoft game besides Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2. It had the original Spider-Man game. Yeah, I'm not talking about the one that recently came out for PS4. I'm clearly talking about the one that came out in 2000 by Neversoft. I think what's cool is that the people behind Neversoft really showed how much of the fans they are of the franchise, and the fact that it was developed by one of the greatest developers of all time, albeit very underappreciated in my opinion, made this game is just absolutely amazing. But you also have the fact that it also got ported onto Nintendo 64, PC, and Game Boy Color as well, not just PlayStation and Dreamcast. But I would say if I had to say the definitive versions of this game, it would definitely go to the Dreamcast version and the PC and the PlayStation 1 version. Although in my opinion, I still say that the one that comes out on top for me personally is still the PlayStation 1 version. I feel like the PlayStation 1 version is the best experience to play this game. I mean, after all, it is the highest rated version, but that doesn't actually decipher my opinions on it. As a guy who actually owns Spider-Man on PS1, I actually own a physical copy of this game, and I have played halfway through it. I really enjoy it for what it is. But if you do have a Dreamcast, this will be one of those games that you will definitely have to get for it. I would definitely get. It would be one of the first games I would get if I were you. Those are pretty much my overall thoughts on the Sega Dreamcast. It's such a wonderful console. It sucks that it suffered an early retirement at the hands of the PS2, but the mark and the legacy it left on the gaming industry will definitely not be forgotten. As a console that was 128 bits, at the time it had the highest definition graphics of all time at the time. So this was so when you really think about it, the Dreamcast was somewhat of a groundbreaking game console in the sense that it was the first to not only not use CDs, but also use its own different physical media, but also the fact that it was able to display HD graphics at the time. Soon that would go to the PlayStation 2. After all, a lot of people ended up buying that because it was one of the most highly anticipated consoles, if not the most highly anticipated at the time, which is one of the main reasons why the Dreamcast was a failure, all because of the huge market demand for the PlayStation 2. But again, like I said, the mark that the Dreamcast made on the video game industry will never be forgotten. Its legacy will most certainly live on 20 years later. So that's about everything I have to say about the Dreamcast. If you guys did enjoy this video, you guys do want to see more videos like this, you guys can go ahead and hit that subscribe button. But peace out, just to be on the infinite, and as always, think for yourself.